Welcome to part 2 of my declutter series. We're gonna go through the rest of my palettes. I have quite a few. If you haven't watched my first one already, I will link it up in the corner if you want to go check it out. But like I was saying in my first video, I'm gonna be pretty ruthless and declutter a lot because I just need to free up space. I have so much makeup. I am one person with two eyes. I don't need this many eyeshadows, and I do get sent a lot of PR, so like 70% probably of my collection have been sent to me. Just keep that in mind when you're watching this so I don't have to mention it every single time. But if you see a brand that I have a bunch of palettes from, just assume that I'm probably on their PR list and I've gotten all of them sent in PR, or at least most of them. Anyway, let's start with Kaleidos. So I have, as you can see, not that many palettes from Kaleidos. I used to have all of them, and I do remember decluttering some in my last declutter. Let's start with this one. This is the, what's it even called anymore? Oh, the Escape Pod. It was on the front, and I had it backwards. But it looks like this. Really, really beautiful palette. I am going to hold on to this for another round. Not a palette that I've used in the past year probably, but I do think it's a beautiful palette, and I still want to have it in my collection. I do think it is time for me though to declutter the Futurism palettes. Even though I really like them, I just don't use them, and they are also discontinued, so I'm going to let go of these. Here is another one. This is the Cyber Bronze palette, and even though I like the colors, really pretty palette, I just know myself that I'm not going to be reaching for this again, so both of those are going to go. Next we have the Club Nebula palette. I'm going to keep that as a collaboration with Angelica, and I think she did a fantastic job with this, and I love the packaging, I love the color story, I love everything about that palette, so it's going to get to stay. Here we have the Flower Punk palette. I've held on to this for the last 3 declutters, and I haven't used it a single time, I think, in the last 3 years, and here I am being like, do I want to keep this? I think it's actually time for me to let this go. Even though I love the packaging, really, really pretty palette, I just don't use it. Like, I could give this to someone who would actually use it and love this palette, but that person is just not me. So we're gonna let go of this one as well. Man, this is hard. Like, I love Kaleidos as a brand, so letting go of stuff, it hurts my soul a little bit. Now, let's talk about these quads from Kaleidos. I am probably going to declutter quite a few of these because I do find a lot of them to be quite repetitive, and I really don't need all of them. I do think though that the quality of them are fantastic, so let's go through them. My favorite is definitely the neutral one. I'm going to keep this. I think it's really pretty. I've used it quite a bit, so that one is going to get to stay. I'm not the biggest fan of like these cool tone like mauve shades on myself, so this one is gonna go. This one is gonna go. These mattes are a little too like dusty and cool tone for what I would normally go for. Don't love that for myself, so we're gonna let go of both of these. This one I don't see myself ever using on its own because the only shimmer in here is very dark, so that would kind of lead itself to doing a darker smoky eye, which I don't really do that often. So I'm gonna let go of this one too, and I'm gonna keep this because it's one of my few very compact, like small cool tone palettes that has, you know, grays and black and a silver in it, and I really like that. This one, I love the shimmer in this though. It's absolutely stunning, but the matte colors, I don't need this. I have similar things to this in other palettes that I can just reach for, so I'm gonna let go of all of those. Like, that hurts me. That really hurts, but it needed to be done. So I think we have a couple of different brands here. We have some Lethal palettes on top. Let me just separate those out, and then there are some Simply Posh on the bottom. Are all of these Simply Posh? Wow, yes they are. I actually have a lot of palettes from them, so let's go through them. We have the Berry Icy palette, which I love this. I'm definitely going to keep it. Really, really beautiful palette. Have no complaints with this one. The Cozy Cabin palette is their holiday palette from last year. Beautiful color story as well. The shimmers in here are just stunning. I'm going to keep this too. The Citrus Punch palette came out, I want to say last spring or last summer. This color story is everything. They did have some issues with some of the shimmers in here getting hard pan and just being too hard pressed, but they have since fixed the issue, and they were very clear that they recognized that there was a problem and they fixed it, so I'm happy about that. But I'm still going to keep this palette because I do think it's really, really pretty. The Aurora Lights palette, absolutely stunning as well. I really love their color stories. Like, I feel like they do such a good job at curating palettes that are interesting but also make sense in a you know, like how to do your makeup kind of way. You know, you always have tones that go nicely together, shades blend well, they don't get muddy, and they just do a really good job. The Genuine Gems palette is one of my favorite palettes from the brand. One of the first palettes I tried from them, so beautiful. And I love that their palettes are magnetic as well. That just makes it so that you can, you know, if you are the kind of person to want to move around your shadows and you have a lot of their palettes, you can definitely do that. And this is the last one. It's the, what are you called? Fairy Tale Fairies palette. Beautiful color story as well. Definitely going to keep all of these. Let's talk about some lethal palettes. I do think I'll be decluttering some of my lethal palettes. Let's just start on top. This is a small quad that I bought thinking that maybe this could be like my perfect neutral quad, and it's just not. Like, it's fine, but I just don't see myself really using this again. I'm sorry I don't know the names of these palettes because they don't put them on here, and I'm not about Googling the names for all of these. I'm so sorry, but this is one of my favorite color stories from Lethal, and I really like this. I think they really amped up the shimmers in this palette, and I love the color story of this, so I'm gonna keep this. This is a palette that I have put in here myself because this was an all shimmer palette when I bought it or got it sent or whatever, but I've taken out the shades that actually came in this palette and I put them somewhere else because I brought them traveling one time, and these are like shades from other palettes that I think that I just don't love that much. These are just like very dark shimmers that I don't reach for. Anyway, long story short, I'm gonna actually probably declutter the shades in this and keep the little magnetic palette, but we're gonna just kind of see. I'm not sure if I've depotted any of my palettes from Lethal. This is one of the collaborations that they did with Teresa is Dead. Let's see. Okay, so all the shades are in here. I can't remember if this is the actual color story of the palette or not, but I'm gonna keep it because it was a collaboration with someone I do consider to be a friend. Here is the other palette that she did with them as well. It looks like this. Yeah, so one of these palettes came with a really pretty silver shade, and I think I moved some shadows around or something like that. See, this is why I don't like moving shadows around, because now I don't know where they are or where they belong or what's going where. So I try not to do that, but I had to. But I'm gonna keep this one as well because it is a collaboration with Teresa and I love her. This is another palette that I have that I think I did the same thing. Yeah, so this is the one that I ended up bringing traveling because these are more like iridescent shades and these are so beautiful. Now that I look at this, I'm like, I want to use these again. So really, really pretty. I'm definitely going to keep these. The Berlin palette, I think I'm going to declutter. It's all right, but the color story just is not my favorite. So that one is gonna go. I need to actually put my keeps on this side so I keep things straight. This is a little 6-pan that they came out with. I think I'm gonna declutter this one. Am I though? See, I feel like with all the palettes that I'm thinking about decluttering, I should just like depot them and put them into a magnetic palette instead. So maybe that's what I'll do. But I think I am going to declutter this as a palette and just keep them as singles. The One Up palette, I do really like this color story, but I haven't found myself really using it. So I think I'm gonna let this one go, and since these are smaller pans, I don't think these are really gonna fit into like a magnetic anything, so I think I am going to just let this palette go. This one, again, I don't remember the name of it. This is how the palette actually came. I am torn on this because it has a lot of dark shimmers and I don't really use dark shimmers that often, so maybe I will let this go. Maybe I will probably depot it and use it as singles is what I'm thinking. So I'm gonna put it in the declutter pile and maybe get around to doing that. Do I want to keep this one as a palette? I think I'm probably gonna depot this one as well because again the shimmers are very dark, but I like the matte selection in here, so I'm probably gonna do that. This one, I do think I am going to keep the way it is. I forget the name of this palette, but this is really pretty. So I am going to hold on to this one. And let's see, what are you? Ooh, this is like one of their more fallish color stories. I think I'm gonna hold on to this one as well. I really like the tones of the mattes in here. I think they're very pretty. So I think I'm gonna hold on to that one too. Let's go through all of my Bella Beauté bar palettes. I have a lot of them. This is a collaboration that they did with Monica from M. Jones on Instagram. I'm gonna keep this. I think this is really pretty. This is called the Celestial Garden palette. I'm also going to keep my basic witch palette because I think this one is really pretty as well. Beautiful color stories. I love everything from Bella Beauté bar. I think their formulas are just so good. Here we have the Smoky Glam palette. This is probably one of my favorite neutral palettes. I've honestly used this so much, and even though I don't love like giant palettes like this, I'm gonna make an exception for this one because I think it is just so pretty, and like I said, I've used it a lot. This is their version of a pastel palette. I think the mattes in here are really nice. I did have some issues with the shimmers creasing, but I am going to hold on to it just because there's such a good selection of mattes in here that I can definitely see myself pulling for this palette just to use those. Next up, we have the Strange and Unusual palette. I'm gonna keep this one as well. I think this was a limited edition, like Halloween release, and I know they brought it back one time, but I don't know if you can still buy this, but I love this color stories. The Angles of Illumination palette. This is an all shimmer palette that is absolutely stunning. I'm definitely going to hold on to that one. I love an all shimmer palette. I know not everybody does, but I just have so much fun with that. This is the Ultraviolet palette. This was a collaboration I think that they did with, I'm having a hard time reading what it says. Deandra Nicole, I think it says in the middle there. I don't know, the font's kind of hard to read. But I am going to hold on to this. I think this is a better curated palette than the Menagerie one that I think I decluttered in my last video. But I'm not someone who usually goes for monochromatic palettes unless it goes from very light to very dark and it has like a lot of variation in the tones. And I feel like this does a good job of that. So I am going to hold on to that one. Next up, we have the Dead Roses palette. I love the packaging on this. Like, this is one of my favorite packaging, I think, from the brand. Kind of a repetitive color story, but it is a very new to me palette, and I do really like a lot of these shades, and these are also magnetic, so I'm gonna hold on to that palette as well. Here we have the Bejeweled palette, which looks like this. I think that I'm going to keep this. I really like a lot of tones in here. I don't love the color story as a whole. I do wish that there were some lighter shimmers, but I do think I like this enough that I still want to keep it around. I'm also going to keep my Recently De-Influenced palette. Is that what it's called? Yeah, Recently De-Influenced. Really pretty palette. Love this color story. There's some very unique shades in this, so holding on to that one. I'm also going to keep the Sun and the Sea palette, which I think it is really beautiful. I do wish that some of these tones weren't like almost exactly the same. Like all of these neutrals up here could have had a little more variation in depth if you ask me, but I still think it's a really pretty palette. The Angles of Illumination 3 palette, one of my favorite palettes ever from the brand. I'm definitely going to keep this. This is also an all shimmer palette, and these are beautiful. Have a couple of different piles here. Let's start with Ace Beauté. I don't know where my little yellow palette from them is, the Flora palette. I simply don't know where it is, which makes me really sad because it's my favorite from the brand, but I'm probably going to keep a lot of these. This is the Color palette. I'm going to keep this. It's a really pretty neutral palette. The Fleur palette is a really pretty purpley pinky palette. I'm going to keep that too. I love how small these are. And the Begonia palette has a mix of a couple of different colors, and I think this is also really pretty. The Paletopoly palette, I would say, is probably Ace Beauté's best palette. I think this color story is everything, so it's not going anywhere. The Tropical Vibes palette, also one of their better color stories. Stunning. Definitely keeping that one. The Aura palette, I think I'm also going to be keeping. I really like the combination of the colors that they chose in this. I think there's a lot you can do with it. And I'm also going to be keeping my Envy palette. I need to use these two mini palettes more often because they're really pretty. So keeping all of my Ace Beauté palettes. Let's move on to Cosmic brushes, or are they Cosmic Beauty now? I honestly don't know. Someone told me that they changed their names, and then I just said that in my next video, and I'm not sure if they actually have. But this is the Serenity palette. Really, really beautiful color story. This is actually not my favorite from the brand, even though I know this is a lot of people's favorites, but I do think the colors are really pretty, and I am going to hold on to it. We have the Delicious Delights palette, which is a more pastel-y palette, really beautiful as well. I love the quality of these palettes, and they're also super affordable, so I don't know how they do it, but I am not complaining. We also have the Muse palette, which I think is my favorite actually from the brand. I just think that there's something about this color story that, I don't know, it just makes me want to use it. So I'm gonna hold on to all of those. Next up, we have two from Wicked Widow, and I think I went through another one from Wicked Widow in my last video, but I couldn't find these two, so I wasn't able to put them together. I don't know the name of this palette because I don't have it on the front, but it looks like this. I'm gonna declutter this because I don't get along with this color story. I look at this and I'm like, I have no idea what to do. Like, to me, this just doesn't make sense, so that one is going to go. This one also does not have a name on it, so I don't actually know what this one is called. This one I am going to keep. I really like the color story of this one a lot more than the other one, and I feel like this just makes a little bit more sense. And you also just have more options, so I'm gonna keep this one. I have two palettes from Unearthly Cosmetics. I have the Abscission palette, which looks like this. Really, really pretty. This is their newest palette. I'm definitely going to keep this. I had a really good time playing with this one I did, so that one is gonna get to stay. And I also have the Man-Eater palette, which mine is missing a shade here because it broke in transit, and this is just supposed to be a black, so it's okay. I have plenty of blacks in my collection. They did send me a replacement actually for this palette, but I gave that away because I felt like I didn't need to have, you know, two of the same palette basically, and I knew someone that would really like it, so I decided to keep the one that was a little faulty because I have blacks in my collection that I can use. Got some different brands in this pile as well. We have 3 different brands. Let's start with Misc Beauty. They don't actually exist anymore, so I think I'm gonna get rid of both of these palettes for that reason. This is the Impressionism palette. I loved this for a very long time. This, I think, was my favorite palette in 2021? No, 2019? I think it was 2019. I don't know, there was something about this color story that just really did it for me. The mattes were beautiful quality. The shimmers were kind of matte, but they were still just really pretty. Like, they were just really pretty, easy to work with, but again, it's just been such a long time that I'm not gonna hold on to these, and the brand doesn't exist anymore. This is the Van Gogh palette. It's pretty, but I definitely like the Impressionism palette a little bit more. I have 2 palettes from Sigma. I have the Princess palette, or Princess Cinderella palette. Looks like this. I think it is very pretty. I am going to hold on to it. Sigma doesn't have my favorite shimmer formula, but their mattes are really nice, and I don't have a lot of palettes from them, so I do want to keep the ones that I do have. This is the Alice in Wonderland palette, and I'm going to keep this one too. I have 3 palettes here from Shroud Cosmetics, and I don't know what I'm going to do about these. I'm definitely going to keep this one though. This is the Halloween palette that they did in collaboration with Betty Jean. I think this is really cool, and it's very her, and even though this color story isn't my absolute favorite, because it is a collab with someone that I do consider a friend, I'm going to keep that one. Next up we have the Creepy Cute palette, which is their pastel palette. I really like the colors in here, but this is getting quite old, and I have so many really good pastels in my collection at this point that I think I am going to let go of this. Also, the magnet is so strong that it pinches my finger sometimes when I'm not careful, so gonna let that one go. I'm also going to let go of my Arcana palette because it's just very dark leaning, and I don't think I've used this in the past like 4 years. So the end is near. I have all of the rest of my palettes on the table in front of me, so let's start with the biggest pile of them all, which is Odens Eye. I have so many palettes from them, and these aren't even all of the ones that they've come out with. Like, I used to have every single one of their palettes. I think I decluttered a couple last time I did my declutter, but we're gonna go through all of these, and I do think that this time around I am going to let go of some of these because they're getting quite old and I just don't use all of these, so I'm scared. Like, I don't want to go through these because I love them as a brand, but we're just gonna have to do it. So let's start with the Alva palette. This is the Alva 2 palette. I think I'm actually going to get rid of this simply because this palette does have 2 pressed glitters and I don't do that. So for that reason, even though I love this color story, I think it's a really pretty palette. Haven't used it in like 2 years. So that one is going to be the first one to go. The Solmone palette, I think I am going to get rid of as well. This is one of their first palettes, and the quality of this is just not as good as their quality is now. I have the whole Saga of Freya collection here. Let's go through these. So this is the double-sided palette that they came out with. I actually really like this, but I also haven't used it. So maybe I will let this one go, even if I do think it's a beautiful palette. I just don't really see myself reaching for that one over the other palettes that I own from the brand. So I'm gonna be good and let it go. Here's the Tears of Freya palette. I'm gonna let this one go as well, just because, again, I just don't really see myself using them. This is the Chapter 2 palette. I'm gonna let this one go too. I actually don't really love the kind of swirly shades. I find them a little bit hard to use, and I think it's not just because of like their formula. I think any swirly shade from any brand is like just annoying. Because like sometimes they can end up looking patchy on the lid if you're not able to like mix the color properly together, and it's just like, why? Yeah, it looks good in the pan, but it's really not that practical. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe that is just me. I do still have some of their mini palettes that I think it is time for me to let go of. This is the Verdande palette. I do think it's really pretty, and I like the formulas and I like the color stories, but I just have so many similar colors in other palettes that I don't need to keep all of these. This is the, what is this one called? Mini Sky palette. It's probably one of my favorite mini palettes from them. But again, I don't reach for these, so I think I am going to let that one go as well. The only one that I want to keep is the Earth palette because I think the color story is the best out of all of the mini palettes, so I do want to hold on to this one. Let's do some more of these smaller ones. So these are all collaboration palettes. This is with Makeup Just for Fun. It's called the Flora Story palette, and even though I don't love this color story, I do like holding on to collaboration palettes just because I think they're fun and I want to still support the creators and be able to like show these in the future. This is the one that they did with Lauren May Beauty, and I also think she is amazing, so I'm going to keep this one as well. And I'm also going to keep the one that they did with Betty Jean, which looks like this. I'm also going to keep all of the collaboration palettes that they did with Angelica, which I think they're all beautiful. So we have the Hella palette, which is the first one that they did. Really, really fun color story. Really like that. And then the Halloween palettes that they came out with last year, which are both really beautiful. I'm gonna keep this one, and I'm going to keep this one too, because I really like both of these. Now, of course, it wouldn't be an Odens Eye video without shouting out my own collaborations that I've done with the brand. First off is the Giant Wolves palette that we did 3 years ago. Beautiful, beautiful palette, if I can say so myself. Love this color story. Actually, I haven't used this palette very much. I have so many of these, you have no idea. So it really looks like I haven't used any of them just because of how many I own. But I'm obviously going to keep my own palettes. Next up, we have the Mighty Monster palette, which is still available. And I've just had so much fun with this palette. I can leave my reveal video up in the corner if you want to watch it, as well as my 8-look video with this palette, because you can do so much with this palette. And I just think it is amazing, obviously, because I made it. And my collaboration was also done together with Judy and Tina. So I'm going to show you their palettes as well. So she has the Red Dragon palette, which was the one that she came out with when I did my Giant Wolves palette. So I'm obviously going to keep that one too. And then this year she came out with the Spring Dragon palette, which is available for sale if you're interested. Obviously going to keep that. And then we have Tina's palettes, which the first one she did, which is no longer available, is the Hummingbird palette. Beautiful, beautiful palette. And this one is still available now, which is the Earthwood palette. Again, super beautiful as well. Let's go through some of the holiday palettes that they have done. This one is from this year. It's the Hey Reindeer palette. I'm gonna hold on to this one. I don't love the color stories, honestly, from this year's holiday release. This is the other one, is the Snow Dream palette. I don't know, there's just something about these that they just don't scream my name as much as the ones from the previous year, which is this one, which is the Merry Christmas palette. Like, look at that, isn't that so pretty? And then this one is the Christmas Eve palette, also just so unique and beautiful. I'm gonna hold on to all of these. The Norns palette, I think I'm going to keep as well because I really like the color story of this. I think this is really pretty. I'm also going to keep the Jewels and Gems palette. This is one of my favorite color stories, honestly, from the brand. I think this is just so beautiful and pretty. And I was very surprised by the looks that I did with that palette because I didn't think at first that I would love the color story as much as I do, but I really ended up loving it. Then we have the Stone and Rock palette, which is like one of my favorite green palettes, I think, in my collection. This is just so pretty, so definitely hanging on to that one too. And the Sol Monde 2 palette I'm also going to keep. Also one of my favorite color stories from the brand. Let's go through some miscellaneous palettes here, some random palettes. I have one from Florasis, which I did declutter one of them in my previous video, saying that I don't think their formula is necessarily what I'm looking for. It's a good formula for what it is, but I think the trash is just here. Sorry about that, but it's a very subtle formula that is still really good quality. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's just not what I'm looking for. Like, I don't want subtle in my makeup, especially my eyeshadows, so even though it's a beautiful palette, the imprints are insane and the packaging is really pretty, I am going to let go of this one. The Cosmos palette from Anastasia is the only one that I have from the brand. I am going to keep this. I actually really like this palette, even though I don't use it much, but I do think it has a place in my collection. The Shelly Liana palette, I have not used this very much, but it's very pretty, so I am going to hold on to that one. Next up, I have the only palette that I've left from Game Beauty. I was on their PR list for a very long time, and I don't know if they just haven't come out with anything recently or if they kicked me off, which I totally understand because I never really loved their formula. I thought it was okay. Like, this is probably the best palette that I have from them. And even this is just kind of, it's okay, but I don't feel like I need this. So I'm gonna let this one go as well. I have two palettes from Alter Ego. I have the Sakura palette, which I am going to let go of. This is a dupe of, I think, one of the Natasha Denona palettes. I forget the name of it, but I just come to realize that I don't really like Alter Ego's formulas that much, and I need to take myself off of the PR list because every time I get a package from them, I just never do anything with it, and I just like give it to my friends, and I feel like that's just not how it should be. So they just sent me this in the mail. I got this yesterday. And this is the Dream Gaze palette. I will show you what it looks like. I'm also going to give this one away, honestly, because I just know that I'm not going to use it. It's a pretty palette, but again, it's a dupe for, is it a Natasha Denona palette? Is it her? I don't even know. I think it could be her pastel palette, but like looking at this color story, it doesn't make me want to use it. Moving on, we have a big pile of Sugar Drizzle. This is going to be tough because I do think I'm going to keep most of these. On top here, we have a holographic 6-pan palette from them, which is really hard to open when you have long nails. I love this. These are the best holographic shadows I've ever tried, and I don't think they sell this anymore, which is very sad, but I am obviously going to keep it. I think I'm also going to keep my pickle palette just because it's really cute and it's very small. I think it's just fun to have a pickle palette in my collection. The Mojito palette, let's see, am I going to keep this? I am going to keep this because it has some very unique shades in it that I really like. This is the Trash palette, and I think I'm going to keep this too. It's an all shimmer palette, and there are some really beautiful shades in this, so that one is going to stay. Next up, we have the Butterfly palette, which, let's see. I think this one I'm gonna let go of because it does have some mattes in here and the shimmers are quite dark, so just not my favorite combinations when it comes to colors. I am gonna keep this one though. This is the, it's just called the Mattes palette, and it's a very monochromatic palette, but I love the formula in here. Like, it is amazing, and I really hope that they're able to get this formula back, but I don't think they've used this since they made this palette, which makes me sad, but this is spectacular. This is like blend bunny quality, so I'm absolutely going to hold on to that one. Let's see, the Flamingo palette, I think I'm going to declutter it because it's very monochromatic, and even though it's pretty, I don't feel like you can get a lot of different looks out of that one. Next up, we have the Don't Forget to Smile palette, which looks like this. This is an all shimmer palette that I honestly forgot I had, so I'm definitely going to keep this, and I want to give this more love because it is beautiful. We have the Meant to Be palette. Is such a cool name. I'm gonna keep this. I don't necessarily love the color story of this. I do find it kind of dark leaning, but I do think it's pretty and I like how small it is, so it's gonna get to stay. Next up we have, this one doesn't have a name on it. Is it called a Warrior palette? A little unsure about that, but I'm gonna keep this. Look at how fun that color story is. Like, that is very, very unique, and I don't think I have anything similar to that in my collection. This palette I've used so much. This is the Sugar Dreams palette. It is an other all shimmer palette. Absolutely beautiful. I love these kind of tones when it comes to shimmers. I really prefer like mid-tone to light shimmers, so this is right up my alley. I'm gonna hold on to that one as well. This one is just so funny. It's called the Trick Roar Treat palette. So obviously their Halloween palette from 2 years ago, I think. I'm gonna keep it. I think it is very, very fun. And I think I'm also gonna keep the MILF palette, which stands for Man I Love Frogs. Another all shimmer palette, and I think it is just beautiful. So I'm gonna hang on to that one too. I will say my keep pile is definitely bigger than my get rid of pile, but that is okay. I'm not trying to like get rid of half of my collection or anything like that, but I do think that I'll be getting rid of quite a few palettes in this pile. I do have some melt palettes here. Let's start with these. So these are from Unearthly Cosmetics. I might be mispronouncing this, but this is Monica's brand. She's done a collaboration with a lot of different brands in the past, and she started her own brand. So this is the first palette that she did. This is called the Moth and the Moon palette. I didn't do a dedicated video on this because I didn't have time, and then it sold out, and I felt like it was just a little too late. But I think the mattes are nice. The shimmers are definitely the stars of the show. So I'm definitely going to keep that one. And then she just came out with this one, which is called the Gloomy Gardens palette, and this is just so pretty. I love the packaging on this one. I really like that she stepped up her game with this, and I have only used this one time, and so far I really like it. I think it's beautiful. There are some gorgeous shimmers in here, and the mattes are pretty, but not the kind of mattes that I would usually go for tone-wise. So I'm intrigued to play more with this palette. Let me know if you want a dedicated video with this. It might be a little too late by the time you're seeing this, but if there is enough interest, I can probably do that. But yeah, let me know if you want to see that. I'm gonna probably hold on to all of my Pat McGrath palettes. I only have one Mothership palette, and this is the Bronze Seduction. I love this palette. I think it is just beautiful, so we're gonna keep her. This is my favorite neutral palette in my collection, and this is called the Liaison palette, I think. I don't think she sells this anymore, but I know some people have gotten it at TJ Maxx. So maybe look there if you're interested, but this is stunning. I always bring this traveling, and I've used this so much, so I think that is a really nice palette. I'm actually also going to keep this one. Now, when I did my review on this, this is one of her holiday palettes from 2 years ago. I said that I didn't really like this palette that much, but it's kind of growing on me. Like, I don't know what it is. I still think the shimmers aren't my favorites, but I think the mattes are really nice in here, and I have found myself actually pulling for this palette, and I didn't think I would. So I am going to keep this for another round, and I feel like the longer I have it, maybe the more I'm going to use it. I don't know, but time will tell, but I do think it's a really pretty palette. Let's talk about my Melt palettes. I think honestly all of these are gonna go. I just don't really like Melt's formula that much. Like, their shimmers are always a miss for me. And even though I like this color story, I have struggled some with the mattes in here somehow. And I don't know, I just don't love it. This was an expensive palette, and I'm sad because I don't like it as much as I was hoping I would. This is the latest palette that I've bought from them. It's the Electric palette, and I think this was sort of like the nail in the coffin for me, being like, you know what, I just don't really like Melt. Maybe we need to break up. So I'm gonna let go of this one too. I felt like, honestly, the mattes in this were worse than in their other palettes. They weren't as pigmented, and they definitely changed their formula a bit. The shimmers are a little bit nicer in this one than the other ones that I own, but it still just doesn't really do it for me. Now, I've held on to these ones for such a long time, and these are the Amor Mariposa? No, that was the palette that I just got rid of. Amor Eternal collection? Is that what this was? It doesn't even say on it, but I think that's what that was. Anyway, I'm gonna let go of these. I think they're so beautiful. I love that I have like the full skull, but honestly, I haven't used these since I did my review on them, which is so sad, and that's been how long now? Too long. So we're just gonna let these go. I'm not someone who really displays makeup. If I was, I would display those, but I just don't care. I'm also going to get rid of my Blueprint palette because I just don't use it. Let's go through some of my DD signature palettes, which I have a lot of. A lot of these were from back when she had her brand, and then she took like a 2-year break. So some of these are quite old, and I probably will not keep all of these, but let's go ahead and sort of take it one at a time here. Let's go through the quads. This is the Guava Quad. I think this is one of the newer ones. I didn't actually like the matte formula that much in this one, so I am going to let this one go. The Pumpkin Spice Quad I love. I think this is beautiful, but the packaging has unfortunately ripped. This is old though, so that's probably why it's kind of falling apart. So we're gonna let this one go as well. The Avocado palette, let's see, do I want to keep this? I'm gonna let this one go. It's also quite old. The Plum Perfection palette, this is one of the newer ones. I really like this, so I'm gonna keep that one. This is also one of the older ones. It's the Peach palette. I'm gonna let this go. I don't really care for this color story, if I'm being honest. The Blueberry palette, I'm gonna let this one go as well, even though I love this shade, but I do have it in other palettes, so I don't need this. I also just don't reach for quads that often. This is the Passion Fruit Quad. This is also quite old, and you can see one of the shadows here have broken, so I'm gonna let this one go as well. This is the Coconut Quad, which is a really pretty neutral quad, but I don't see myself really using this as a standalone because I feel like I need more. So I'm gonna let this one go as well. So this is a palette that she came out with a bunch of single shadows. There are some holographic shadows in here that I don't love that I'm actually going to take out and declutter. But these two shimmers up here are stunning, and I'm going to put in the other single shimmers in this same formula into this palette instead. But I am going to pop out these ones because I don't like those. So I'm actually just going to go ahead and do that because I can. I only have 3 of the shimmers, so I do like those. So I'm just going to take those out. And now I have room for another shimmer that I like too. So these are gonna go and this is going to stay. So here are some of her bigger palettes. This is the newest palette, is the Blooming Basket palette. I love this color story, really fun and summery. I'm gonna keep that one. I do think I'm gonna declutter the Jingle Bell Ruby palette. I find that this color story is just a little, not boring, but I don't know, like it just doesn't scream my name. It's not that this is bad quality at all, it just doesn't really do it for me. So that one is gonna go. I also have the classic Autumn palette, which I also feel like this color story is a bit like overdone, and I don't love the combination of the shimmers to the mattes in here. It's just, I don't know. I don't think there's anything wrong with this, but again, the color story just doesn't speak to me as much. This is the Neutral Wonder palette. I think I am going to hold on to this one again. Now, this one is quite old, but I do think it's a beautiful palette still, and I think she still makes this now after she came back from her little absence, so I am going to hold on to that one. I have some small palettes here that I'm going to probably get rid of a lot of. I have 3 of the Urban Decay ones, which these are just so boring. I'm sorry, but yawn. I did get these all sent in PR, and I don't think I made a video with any of them, because look at them. It's just like, I can't. I'm sorry. The packaging is beautiful, and if they had done something with the color stories, I might have kept them, but I am going to declutter all of these. I have 3 of these mini palettes from Dose of Colors. These are quite old, and I don't really use them. This is the Smoky Soiree palette. I think I'm just going to let these go, because I just have similar colors in other palettes that I actually use, and I really thought I would use this neutral one more, but the tones weren't exactly what I was looking for, so all of these are going to go. Here we have all of my Fantasy Cosmetica palettes, and I think I'm going to keep all of them. This is the Warlock palette. I really love them as a brand. I think their packaging is really fun, and their formula is nice. This is the Bard palette. Here we have the Fighter palette, which is such a pretty neutral palette with a twist. We have the Sorcerer palette, which is one of my favorites from the brand. Really beautiful. We have the Rogue palette, which looks like this, also really pretty. This is the Wizard palette, which is their newest palette. This is probably one of my least favorite color stories, but I still think it's a fun palette, so I'm going to keep that one. Actually, I think I am going to declutter these shadows. These are holographic shadows, and they just didn't really do it for me. I don't know. I wasn't blown away, but I'm going to keep this little empty palette still. This is the first palette that they came out with. It's the Druid palette. They have updated their packaging for a lot of their older palettes to be like more contrasty, like this one. You can see it's very dark on the first one, so I'm gonna keep this one as well. Next up we have all of my Flower Nose palettes, and I think I'll be keeping most of these. I'm gonna declutter this one though, which is the first one that I tried, and one of the first palettes I think they came out with. Can you see like what an improvement they have done in their packaging? Like absolutely insane. I do think this is a really nice palette, and I like the color story for being a neutral palette, but I have neutral palettes in my collection, and this one is not special enough for me to want to keep it. But all of these other ones are so pretty. The only one that I am going to declutter is going to be this one. This is from the Chocolate collection, and I felt like the quality of this palette wasn't as good as the quality of their other palettes. And I don't know why, but I really struggled with the mattes in here. And I haven't had any problems with any of their other palettes, so I am going to declutter this one as well. But the rest of these I am going to keep. Let's start with, what is this one called? This is the Moonlight Land from the Mermaid series. Such a pretty palette. I love this. Like, this is so fun, and I remember the look I did with this. I loved it, so I'm gonna keep that one. This is also from the same collection, I think. No, this is the Black Swan collection. Also just really, really interesting color story, and the formulas are amazing, and the packaging, I mean, you can't beat it. Like, it feels so nice and luxurious, and it's just, it's beautiful. It truly is beautiful. This is one of my favorite palettes from them. This is the Blackcurrant Cold Brew from the Rococo collection, and it's just a beautiful neutral palette. Like, this diamond shade in here is so sparkly and so beautiful, and the packaging is just also just out of this world. These ones are from their newest collection, and I have not done anything with this collection yet. Let me know if you want to see something with it. I don't know if it's going to be too late by the time I get around to it, but this is a really pretty neutral palette. I think this is stunning. And then we have this one with like pops of purples and blue, also just so pretty. I really do want to do something with these palettes at some point, so I probably will get around to that. I just don't know exactly when. So we are nearing the end. I have one big palette pile left here. These are all of my Unearthly palettes, so maybe we'll start with those. I do feel like I'll be decluttering some of these, but let's see. Let's start with the Daily Grind palette. I do think I'm gonna let go of this one. The color story is okay, but it's not my favorite from the brand. Next we have the Don't Be Jelly palette. I didn't love the formula in this palette, so I'm actually gonna declutter this one as well. I feel like that might be an unpopular opinion, but I didn't feel like the quality was as good as a lot of their other palettes, so I'm gonna let this one go. The strawberry, what is this one called? Strawberry Milkshake palette. I think this is a really fun palette, but I don't use it, and I just don't think that I ever will, so I'm gonna let this one go as well. It hurts me. The Vitality palette, I'm definitely going to keep. This is one of my favorite palettes from the brand. I think this is beautiful. I'm also going to keep the Witching Hour palette, which I haven't used that much, but I do feel like this color story is super, super fun. The All I Ever Wanted palette was one of my favorite palettes from, I think, 2 years ago. This is an all shimmer palette. I love all shimmer palettes, so I'm going to keep that one. I also have the All I Ever Wanted 2 palette, which I am also going to keep. This also is an all shimmer palette. Absolutely stunning. I'm also going to keep this one, which is the... me trying to find the names of palettes that I cannot remember because I have so many palettes, but I literally can't remember and it doesn't say on it. Anyway, this is what the palette looks like. I'm gonna keep it. This is like their pastel palette, and I think this is really pretty. I'm also going to keep the Sleepover palette, which is honestly one of my favorites from the brand. I think it's a really cool color story, and even though it's like a monochromatic palette, you can do a lot with this. So that one is staying. I am going to declutter Warms My Blood, which is very painful because this is such a pretty neutral color story, but the shimmers in here just crease and wear so badly on me that I cannot. I just can't. It makes me sad, but I just know I'm not going to use it because I'm gonna be scared of wearing it out of the house and fear of like not having any eyeshadow on my eye after a couple of hours. This is the Dead of the Night palette, and I do think I'm going to... looking at it, I'm like, I don't really feel like using that, so maybe I should declutter it. It's a pretty palette, but I don't know, it's just not really screaming my name. Next we have the Leather and Lace palette, one of my favorites actually from the brand. I think this is just a very cohesive color story that makes a lot of sense. It's very easy to use and the formulas are great. I'm also going to keep this one. It's the other Don't Be Jelly palette. I really don't know why they named another palette the same thing that they already had a palette in. I know this has been discontinued since they came out with the other palette, but still, like, there's so many things you can call a palette. You don't need to call it the same thing, but I am going to keep this one. This was back from when they used to be Alien Cosmetics, and I love this palette. It's so pretty, so I am going to hold on to this one too. This is the In the Dark palette, and I do think I'm going to keep this. I think this is a fun, unique color story. This one I think I am finally going to declutter. I forget the name of this because it doesn't say on it, but it's just old. I've just had this for a very long time. And why do I keep having hair like literally everywhere? Like, I know I have long hair, but where's it coming from? Anyway, I'm gonna declutter that one as well. And we only have one pile left here, which is my P.Louise palettes. And I don't have a lot of them. And I am going to keep these mostly because I think these just look really good in the bookshelf behind me. I don't honestly use them very much because I find them extremely annoying and bothersome to use, but This is what the one side in this one looks like. I think it is really pretty. And then on the other side, you have another pastel palette. And I do think that P.Louise has one of the best matte formulas out there. And I just hate this. Like, it came with a little lock, and I think I'm just going to cut off like all of this and just, I can't. Like, it's just annoying. Here we have the other one, which is called Unlock Your Creativity, and this is also a double-sided palette. Can you see now why I don't use these? Because they're so annoying. This is so pretty. Like, I love this. This side is absolutely stunning, and the other side of this palette is absolutely stunning as well. So I do really like this one as a color story, but mostly I just like them for decorations, if I'm being honest. Next, we have the Watch the Queen Conquer palette, which is a chessboard. It's like, of course P.Louise has to make something that's, you know, super annoying and bothersome to use, but here's what the color stories of both of these look like. These are beautiful. I've actually brought this palette traveling before, and it wasn't as cumbersome as I thought it would. It's just annoying when you're trying to use like both sides at the same time, which I'm someone who definitely likes to dip into both when I'm using this, but I do think it's pretty, and I am going to keep it. And this also looks nice on my bookshelf. So that is going to be it. I'm going to give you a little tally at the end here and let you know how many palettes I ended up keeping and how many I ended up decluttering, and then we will sum up this video. So the verdict is in, and my declutter count ended up being 102 palettes, and I kept 191. So obviously still a lot of freaking eyeshadows, and I'm okay with that. I love eyeshadows. It makes me really happy. This is part of my job, and so I think it's okay for me to have, you know, an excessive amount of makeup, because this is sort of what I do. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed watching my declutter series. Thank you so much for being here. As always, if you are new to my channel and you want to see some more content, don't forget to subscribe, and hopefully I will see you in my next video. Bye!